So, welcome to our compliance conversations in the midst of COVID-19, hosted by Ilsa and Spot On Insurance, as you see on the screen somewhere. Thank you, Sandra. Today, we're going to be covering audits, market conduct, and data calls. And this is part 1 of 2. So,
because there's a lot of stuff to
fasten your
here.
seatbelts.
So thank you guys from all over the country and actually across the ocean, since we are in beautiful Puerto Rico. Thank you guys for being here. This is a 1-hour session. Today's guest panelist, if you'll just wave your hands when I introduce you, is my very good friend, Joanne Delgado, Vice President of Education and Compliance at the Surplus Lines Association of California.
Coming to you live from Long Island.
My other good friend, Larry Schiffer, Senior Partner at Squire Patton. He's done 2 soy episodes for us on our podcast, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Larry, coming to you from the East Coast.
Hey, Larry.
And John Hayward, and Hayward. That's why I kept saying during the week, do we have the spelling of his name correctly? Because I thought it was Hayward, but I wanted to stick a Y in there.
Yeah.
He is Market Conduct Oversight Manager at the Washington State Office of the Insurance Commissioner. And my good friend, Cindy Sproul, which I am actually for the first time getting to see kind of live, even though we've been friends for a couple of years. She is the Vice President of Operations at BGM Insurance Services in lovely Iowa.
Our ILSA participants are Russ Foster, better known as Batman, and Christian Masonette, our manager at Spot On Insurance.
And Sandra Tavares, our brand ambassador, is down at the screen below.
Yeah.
Ambassador.
Yes, and our moderator and chat manager is none other than Joyce King, our quality assurance administrator. One of the things that I'm going to share with you guys really quick, in case we don't get to it later, is for the latest COVID-19 and other state regulatory bulletins. You can always find those on our ILSA newsroom, and Russ is going to share those with you guys so that you can see where that great resource is.
All right, so if you go to our ILSA Inc. website, you'll see tabs for our resources. Probably the most important one in the times we find ourselves is our state regulators, our newsroom. There we go. So on the newsroom tab, we have the most up-to-date bulletins from all the states to let you know what's going on in your particular state, or if you're in multiple states and you need to know what's going on. We have it all here sometimes before they even post it on their own websites. So for instance, we've got one from Massachusetts from today. If you have something specific, you can search. All of these are tagged. You can search by tags. If you need something from a particular state, of course, you can do that. All of these are, as I said, as current as we can possibly keep them. Because of the way that we're hooked into the states, we get the notices sometimes before they get it posted on their websites. Another thing that's handy for you is our state regulator contact information on our resource tab. All of these are collections of everything that's available on the state websites. So for instance, since we have a guest from Iowa here, if you want to know how to get a hold of the Department of Insurance, the Department of Revenue, there's a licensee search on the Department of Insurance site that will take you right to it. There's a business entity search on the Secretary of State page. So you can write, you can call, you can email, or you can use the resources that are on those pages, and you can get that right here. You can bookmark these. We encourage everybody that wants to have quick access either to information or to be able to contact the states. Go ahead and bookmark that. It's free. That's an industry public service from ILSA.
And so concludes our PSA. Public service announcement.
All right, now let me see if I can.
That is awesome.
I'm trying to stop sharing. Here we go. Lost my menu there for a second.
So Joyce, today we're going to be talking about audits, market conduct, and data calls. And you said you're going to let the experts run with it because you're just going to be chilling and learning, taking notes.
We'll see.
Asking questions. Yeah, no, you're not going to hear me go off on a tangent talking. I don't know what this stuff is, so I'm here to learn.
Ooh.
All right,
Take it away.
experts, y'all, you guys have the floor today. So I also want to say we encourage questions in the Q&A from anybody that's in the audience. Feel free to chat the panelists up on the chat side, and we will get as deep into the weeds as the conversation takes us today. So this is a two-part series. I have lots of questions, and if we don't get to it today, then we expect to get to it next week. So I want to start this off just with a basic question or a generic question. And Joanne, I'm coming at you with this one. Just tell us, what is the purpose of market analysis?
So, I mean, market analysis is really collecting, and I'm going to say analyzing data to get a better understanding of what the marketplace look like. And then as well to kind of identify the patterns and the practices that insurers are following to kind of see how they deviate from the norm. So, you know, at a state level, a state's program is really assessing how well the market does as a whole, and the individual companies that are in the market and how they're meeting consumer needs. So it's really all about the data collection and the analysis, which is done, you know, I'm going to say by an investigation or examination, surveys, reporting requirements, and then, you know, really using those different methods to do that analysis.
Thank you. Thank you for that summary. That's how I wanted to kickstart it. So if you weren't aware, now you are. And that's what we're talking about today. All right, John Hayworth is not only the market conduct supervisor there at the Washington Office of the Insurance Commissioner, but he is also a chair of one of the NAIC work groups that has to do with market conduct. So, John, I've already prepared you, but I'm going to be coming at you hard and heavy today with a lot of these questions. And again, just share as little or as much as you want. We're all ready to learn on this topic. So John, can you explain to us the role that the NAIC and specifically the work group that you chair, what role do they play in our subject matter today?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Joyce. And yeah, certainly I'd be able to, without causing insomnia for people, maybe or curing it. I chair the Market Analysis Procedures Working Group for the NAIC, and for those who aren't aware, a National Association of Insurance Commissioners is basically a group where all the commissioners get together. It is based in Kansas City, Missouri. We're going to have a meeting starting up in July 28th this year. It's going to be basically same way we're doing this. Usually we all meet in person, and there's multiple work groups that get together to go through processes and procedures. So there is like I say, the Market Analysis Procedures Working Group, where we basically look at the procedures for doing some of the things that Joanne spoke about. Companies file a whole bunch of data points, information. There's financial statements, there's complaints that come in through the different insurance departments that all get basically condensed into one large database. We get all the information on producers, appointments, affiliations, things like that. Regulatory information, any infractions and consent orders. Hey, is California doing a market conduct exam? I can look it up real time. If I've got a question about it, I can pick up the phone and call basically the examiner in charge of that. Very high level, though, with market analysis, there's several pieces to it. Joanne got a good chunk of it, but I can get a little bit more in the weeds for those who maybe aren't quite up to it. First is basically baseline analysis, where the different insurance departments, they get these huge Excel spreadsheets, they might put them together in Microsoft Access, and they're comparing like the market conduct annual statement that basically looks at what insurance companies are filing annually on the different insurance lines. basically complaint activity, claim activity. Are they paying claims within 30, 60, 90 days? It could be on private passenger auto. It tells you who the non-standard carriers are. It could be on homeowners, life insurance. It could be on individual annuity. It could be on flood insurance. So we get a lot of data. And of course, as Joanne says, we're trying to go through and scan and try to figure out, are there any outliers? So if we are going to go and contact a company, so we want to go to contact, say, X Insurance, because they came as an outlier. It looks like, hey, they're paying claims really late. What's going on here? Could it be that the data indicates that they're paying late, but they actually keep the claim open because they're looking for a supplemental filing or something later on? So we can ask pointed questions in the least intrusive way, as opposed to, in the past where we would show up, basically do a call letter, 60-day notice. We'd have to set up budgets and so forth for something that if I've got the data, I could probably pick up the phone and say, hey, it looks like your claim activity is tending outside, normal. On the NEIC website, it basically has kind of what those parameters are so that insurance companies can see if they're outliers or not. It's not necessarily a black box, but the information specifically to companies is held confidential. So you just basically get, what the 5%, the 20%, 30% and things like that are. So yeah, if we contact a company, we can ask questions. We may follow up with an interrogatory or a policy or procedure, and then we can basically close out that activity. Thanks very much for helping us out, and we kind of go on our way. So I hope that answers your question in that regard. Thank
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, John, I do have a follow-up question for you, because
Okay.
ILSA gets involved in this a lot from our client side. Like they're being, they have a market conduct going on, and they'll have us, issue them reports based on the state that the examination is taking place. But one of the things that you mentioned on the carrier side is that data is available. I'm sure that it's scrubbed, but they're able to do their own internal analysis, right, to see how they're standing compared to the marketplace, correct?
Yeah. We get things. It's pretty specific, but it doesn't get really into the weeds on a specific line per se. But like for auto insurance, I can get a pretty good idea. We have what is called a level 1 process that we fill out through the NEIC eyesight application that other regulators can see. So if I'm looking at carrier X, we can have one of my people, or I could do it myself, go through basically a list of questions and try to figure out if there's any issues or concerns. Another state could actually read my report and basically say, hey, I had the same question, but John already answered it. So it could be a circumstance where I can't figure out what the answer is. It's something that I can't find from any other source. Then we will go and approach a company, but we try to do our information. Otherwise, sometimes it feels like it's a fishing expedition, and we don't want to have it go that way. And I just want to preface this. I was a producer at one time. I actually had to sell life insurance and health insurance, so I understand that perspective, sitting across a table from someone and trying to go through benefits. I also worked for a health insurer for 11 years and managed several different departments. So I understand when I'm asking questions, I kind of know what the results are kind of supposed to be. I've got it at least, the guardrails set up, so I can make sure I'm actually asking it in the right way that hopefully someone can understand it and respond back. I don't want to go and ask a question and then we're going back and forth. Well, I don't understand, the context or so forth. So I want to make sure that I'm asking something and I actually have a reason to ask it, not just, hey, it'd be kind of nice to know. So hopefully I answered that question for you.
Very good. Thank you.
John, when you and I visited on the phone earlier this week.
Larry has a...
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I just raised my hand.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just had a quick question for you. And this comes from a different context. But do you have subject matter experts when you're looking at different lines of business or different issues when you're doing this kind of analysis? Because I've had experience in the past more with attorney generals than departments, obviously, where you sit across the table from somebody and they're asking questions and you basically have to start doing a 101 class because they literally have no idea what they're talking about. And so I'm wondering, when you're doing this kind of analysis, do you have enough people with enough expertise so they understand the nuances in the different lines of business?
Very valid question, I can say, for Washington State. Yeah. You know, one from just going through and getting the designations, CPCU and FLMI and so forth. Working, I've been in insurance for over 30 years. And so the next question is, okay, great, John, you might be, but what about your staff? And so most of my staff come from basically the producer or carrier side of business. It's really hard to regulate something if you don't understand it. I mean, if you had a football referee out there, hey, first day, let me get the book and try to figure this out. That doesn't really go well, if you follow. So I understand what your perspective is. I do spend some time with our attorneys. So when we send things for enforcement or follow up, they'll bring me in and go, okay, can you explain the context and also why certain laws do or do not apply? I've had certain circumstances where attorneys say, RCW XYZ applies to this, and I go, well, it would if it was the correct line of insurance. And so there is discussion in that regard. Again, we're trying to minimize confusion and make sure that we have the right staff. But then further to your point, Larry, I train a lot for the NAIC, especially for the Western Zone, where we bring in new examiners from the different states and we walk through the process. This is what you walk through. This is what you see. Non-standard lines means what? Trying to clarify the terms and so forth. Because, in an ACA environment, you're not underwriting, but, for certain other products, you can. So you need to understand what those guardrails are. So hopefully that explains it for you. Thank you.
John, I wonder if you can answer this one because of your connection to the NAIC, but do you know approximately how many states have adopted the NAIC market conduct surveillance model law, or they have a similar law?
Well, the last count that I came up with is around 6 that actually adopted it, pretty close to what it was, out of 2004. And just kind of gives some history of what that market conduct surveillance model is or was, depending on your reference point. The standard used to be, prior to this law, was if you called an exam or you had a regulatory schedule, and there's some states that still have it, every 3 years or 5 years they'll call a market conduct exam. And in other companies in some of the states were saying, okay, is there a better way of doing this? Can we, using market analysis and looking at the data that a lot of companies already file, can we have that looked at first as opposed to, okay, we're going to go do a market conduct exam. We want to look at advertising. We want to look at underwriting. And we want to look at how you pay claims and how do you have your people appointed and all those different processes. The thought was, well, could we look at this data? So to put it in some perspective, when we're doing our level 1 analyses that I referred to in market analysis, I can tell if I'm looking at company X what the average length of an appointment is for a producer, nationally and in the state. So for a company that might be selling some sort of volunteer type health products or whatever, they may have some churn with their producers, and you can see, okay, the average length of appointment might be 6 or 9 months because people realize, hey, I can't do this isn't what I want to do, and then they they move on or whatever. Whereas with some health carriers where they may not have a lot, you may have the average appointment length for a producer is 5 years or whatever. So if you've got a pretty good idea what the longevity is for some of these producers, and I've already looked at the data, maybe I don't want to focus on that, if you get what I'm saying. So kind of roundabout way, and again, I don't want to have people falling asleep on me. The Market Conduct Surveillance Act was basically finding the least intrusive way of identifying if there's an issue or concern, and then try to deal with that up front. Because as a regulator, yeah, we're trying to make sure consumers are treated fair, but as my football referee analogy also, we want to make sure that it's an even playing field for the carriers. We don't want to have the acts of a few bad ones start setting basically the compliance standard, so that the acts of the few are actually driving out the people that are actually trying to do it right. So hopefully that answered the question in a roundabout way. But there are 21 other states that are also have something similar.
Similar, yeah. I've got that list. Thank you for pointing that out as well. And my follow-up question to that real quick was, what about the other states who have not either adopted that law or something very similar? There's actually quite a few I notice in this list.
There are quite a few, and there are some issues that I've gotten so I understand what the nuances are. So as I said, I've got access to a lot of data. So let's go back to company X is being examined by a certain state, and it shows up. I get email notices every morning on these are the companies with new market conduct exams or market conduct actions where there's a touch point with that company. And high level, we don't want to necessarily, I don't want to use a bad phrase, but dogpile on an insurance company and say, oh, okay, well, gee, Washington's looking at them and 5 other states, we might as well look at them too, or whatever. Okay, well, you need to understand why people are looking at them and what have you. And a lot of times, if I do see something like that, I will basically talk to another state before we get involved, because maybe they already figured out what the answer is, and so I'll go that direction. But we do, as I said earlier, do have training sessions for the other states on kind of some what the processes are. But getting to your real question, I've seen something go across my desk, an email or whatever, that something is called on an insurance company, and really the root of it is the state just had a question on a market conduct filing, market conduct annual statement filing, and one of the data points looked weird, and so the state was basically saying, via phone call or an email, hey, was this fat fingered or something like that? Well, to keep it confidential, they technically have to call an exam under their exam authority to basically get that interaction held confidentially. So I think most states are doing something similar as far as trying to follow the market conduct surveillance model. It's just, going through the legislature. Some states, they meet every 2 years, some it's annually. I do a lot of bill analyses on insurance bills that are being run through our legislature. And so I look at a lot of things where I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure how this works or what have you. So there's a number of bills that just never get traction and move forward. So I know that states are still talking about it. As you say, it's still a model law. We still have the Market Analysis Procedures Working Group. And if you look at the NAIC website, we've got a lot of members on it. The calls are open, so people are free to make comments or review the information on the websites, as with all the other departments and also the committee meetings and what have you. So hopefully that gets roundabout to answering that question, not to be too lengthy.
And we're already getting questions in through the Q&A as well. I have 3 that are stacking up, so I'm going to present those. John, I won't necessarily direct these at you. Maybe you'd like a break, but whoever can help me answer this one. What is the relationship, if any, between a market conduct exam and a triennial exam? Not it. I don't know. Somebody else.
I've never had a triennial exam, so there are circumstances where we'll have a combined financial and market conduct exam Those don't happen all that often. Some states do them. Financial exams are specified, usually the 3 or 5 years. There's an accreditation process for that. Market conduct, we don't have an accreditation process, though I'm chair of a work group where we're trying to set up a certification process so that the questions that you're saying about, hey, is there a standardized way that states can approach this? Trying to come up with a more standardized way, even though we know that some of the laws are a little bit different. But to your specific question, I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay. Real quickly, I have a question here. Well, there's a little preface, so let me read this and then present the question. Virginia's DOI published a helpful document regarding common issues uncovered in market conduct exams. The document provides a good foundation for a carrier to proactively ensure their processes meet the necessary standards. Here's our question, is there a consolidated source that carriers can refer to that clearly and concisely educates them on common market conduct filings? That's one of my questions.
Oh, okay, or issues thereof. And in a roundabout way, not necessarily, because it depends on the specific state and various insurance laws. You have some states that do not require filings of forms, for instance, or rates for certain products. Other states, it's completely different. You'll have some circumstances where producers don't have to be appointed, and other states where they do. Most of the issues that I run into are the use of unappointed producers. They've left their appointments lapse, whatever. I run into a lot of that. We run into a lot of unlicensed activity. We run into a lot of circumstances where companies are not marketing under their legal name, the name that they are licensed under. Primarily because there's third-party vendors out there marketing on their behalf, and they get, they say, well, we're using our brand name or whatever. But a lot of states have laws that say, well, you gotta have to do business in your legal name, because when complaints come in, we need to be able to track it. I've had circumstances where companies that aren't even licensed in my state are all of a sudden getting tracked with complaints on them, and the complaint really isn't to that company, but you get circumstances where things get marketed with a pretty generic name, and then all of a sudden it gets affixed to whoever the first company that comes up on our database may or may not be, whether they're licensed or not. So there isn't a specific one. We do get times though where companies will actually call me up. I get producers call me up and so forth, and they say, hey, we want to try this new thing. Can we set up some time and run it by you? Certainly. And then I can go through and say, well, these are the things you might be, might want to look at. I've got some concerns. Can you clarify that? We ran into that a lot with usage-based insurance, where we were trying to figure out, okay, there's certain time frames that talk about renewals and notifications and 30-day notices, and how do you do that with something that's only valid for 10 days or something like that. So we do try to discuss that with folks, but trying to put that all together in a comprehensive way that covers the laws for all the different states. We don't necessarily have that. The NAIC does have, though, a lot of reference material that's pretty generic, but not to the specificity that you're looking for.
Okay.
Joyce, I'm going to direct a question real quick to Joanne, since now she's transitioned onto the role of a regulator, but prior to this, she was with a very large carrier and large brokerage. What did you find as a good way to handle this on a national level? Did you have some guide that you put together?
I was going to say, we really had to build our own, I'm going to say, reference manual and procedures, where again, we're using the resources that are out there and kind of putting that together along with practical experience, best practices that we needed to build and ensure we're in place with all of our different offices. So it was kind of a conglomeration of different materials that we put together in one, what I'll call, market conduct procedural guide. But it does take time to build, and you want to have a broad participation level to make sure you hit it at all the different places that the exams look at.
Very good. Thank you, Joanne.
And I think that I was thinking, and mind you, I don't have any background in the topics that we're covering today. So one of the questions I had ready to pose was, should every carrier have a copy of the market regulation handbook? Is that a good handbook that helps there, or does that cover something else? Is that too generic? It doesn't get into the details as to what this other question was asking.
Well, it does gives you a framework to operate from. So it will basically say, and there's also some courses that the Insurance Regulatory Examining Society has. There's an MCM class that carriers can take that basically says, hey, this is what a market conduct exam looks like. This is how the handbook works, and so forth. So there's an exam coordinator at the insurance company, so people like myself can talk to them, and everyone kind of understands what the framework is that we would be operating if in fact we were going to be calling an exam, or even how market analysis works. But yeah, I would recommend folks, because there's a lot of times where they're going, well, what is it that you're looking at? And I was saying, well, a lot of these processes and procedures are mapped out in the market reg handbook. So if you're going, well, gee, companies trying to figure out where I'm coming from, why am I looking at this? What are the standards? Why? And what's that expertise? You know, did I just dream up this policy and procedure that it is that I'm trying to examine? No, actually, it's all pretty much mapped out. I know that there's been some other questions on data calls and things like that, but for the most part, it does say what we're looking at for governance and oversight and policies and procedures and training materials and claims management activity, underwriting activity, what an advertising file looks like, and it doesn't necessarily get into the specifics of carrier X, you need to do this for this product or this product, but it does break it out on what to expect for health insurance or life insurance or P&C products.
The role that producers play in market conduct, and again, I guess it's not a huge role. That's more directed at carriers, the market conduct examinations, but obviously producers do have to provide some kind of information during the data requests or anything. Is there a procedure handbook or anything that you think would be helpful for any licensees or producers to follow, in case they're kind of pulled into an audit of some kind?
Well, our office does go through and look at producers. Again, are they handling cash correctly? Separate accounts. We're not having commingling issues, things like that. That's a little bit different than per se market conduct, because we're primarily looking at insurance companies. But on the flip side, what we do for the market conduct side is we do look at a lot of social media. And so there are circumstances where stuff comes across my Twitter feed and I'm going, huh? Can they do that? That's a new product. I've never heard of it. Has it been filed or whatever? And there's been times where I go and I look at a producer's website because, again, our people are really savvy with social media, and it's some new product or whatever that hasn't been filed, and it looks like they're marketing it in my state. So then that becomes an issue where we do refer it to some sort of way to look at what's going on. Are these people actually appointed? Are these companies know about this? Is this some new type of service or whatever? We've been running into situations with certain pet insurance type products where we've been trying to figure out, okay, how are these really marketed? There's things going on with health share ministries that are being marketed by different groups out there, and we're trying to figure out, okay, are these aggregator sites? Are they referral sites? What have you. And so then that does go back to a market conduct aspect, because we're kind of looking at the acts of the agents or the acts of the company, who actually is overseeing this, at which point we will go back to the insurance company and ask those questions.
Okay.
I don't see anyone falling asleep yet, so
No.
just let me know if I'm getting too far off the tangents. But
That's so funny. You mentioned the websites a moment ago, because one of my questions, have there been instances where producer websites reference insurance products that have not been filed yet with the departments of insurance?
Yeah, well,
And
in fact,
Larry's going, yeah, too.
yeah. Well, I've run into that, but circling back, kind of the Twitter sphere, I had a company that basically sent out a tweet that basically said, "Hey, anyone know of any special ways of getting these filings approved in Washington State?" And I looked at this tweet, and it's like, I know that person. So I picked up the phone and called them and said, "What do you want to know about how to get a filing specially approved, whatever that means, in Washington State?" And they're going, "Well, John, how'd you know I was asking the question?" And I'm going, "Really? You put it on your Twitter feed, right? And if there's things on, insurance related topics, I will monitor that sort of stuff. And, I want to make sure too that they're actually getting basically the answer from the regulator and not their friends, if you get where I'm going, because then that only creates bad problems. So yeah, there are times where we reach out. Like I say, if there is something on a website that looks at maybe how a product is being marketed, and maybe that is something where contextually maybe they've added on something that doesn't appear to be something that's been filed, we will go back either to contact the agent, or we'll go back and contact the insurance company that has that affiliation, and basically say, are you aware of this, and what are your processes and procedures for verifying how this stuff is actually truly marketed, because it was filed in our state saying this is how it works and so forth, but we're looking at something, and the context seems to be that it works something else, and maybe ratings a little bit different, things like that. So
Ooh,
hopefully
Joy,
that gets.
I cannot wait till we do a session on social media activity and what's taking place there, and how regulators are also using that and looking at that.
Oh, well, there is. If there's a white paper on social media that was put together by the NEIC, that this is back 7 or 8 years ago now, but I was involved in that, and the whole concept that we're talking about, big data and so forth. I do get a lot of companies that talk about all the different models and so forth, and because I do work in Python and SQL and do access databases and all these other things, I try to figure out, okay, can they actually explain it that I understand it? And there have been quite a few times where they seem to be really hesitant in giving me a response, like I overshot the runway or something. But we do inquire when people start using the big phrases, and I go, okay, well, can you explain how that works? Especially since we do know that there is ways to scrape websites to get all sorts of social media data. You can use Beautiful Soup, a Python application, and set up the web scraping, and you can set your terms, and you get all sorts of information. So there are those tools that are out there. I don't know of a whole lot of regulators that use them, but I certainly know how to use them. And I know that companies are doing something, for lead generations and whatever. And so when I have the conversation, I want to make sure that I'm up to speed on, what they're talking about and how social media is being used, either as an advantage or a disadvantage. And also tell my kids don't post certain things. So hopefully
I
that
feel
helps.
like at the end of this, John, you're going to get a bunch of phone calls from people going, show us your ways.
Well, I do get a lot of it, again, from various states. So like I said, I do training sessions for the NEIC, where we've brought in people and basically explained, hey, this is where things are going. Hey, we're having this on a social media platform. If you say, 6 months ago, how many people were really doing this? But this is the new way of reality. So we need to be looking that direction. But I have also had insurance companies that say, hey, you keep talking about this market analysis stuff. Can you explain it to us? And so I show up for what's supposed to be booked for a 1-hour meeting, and it becomes 5 because they keep asking more and more questions. Like, how do you get that data? And I'm actually showing them how I'm doing this real time, and the data that I'm getting, because it's their data, and how I'm looking at it, and then I'm just going, is this right? And they're going, whoa, yeah, but we're not sure. Can you show us again how you came to that conclusion? Because we are looking at, how premiums are increasing, decreasing, market mixes, claims activity, third-party vendors, things like that. And plus, I can see what other people in other states have seen, so I have a pretty comprehensive perspective of how the company is operating. Large now. Getting into the weeds, that's when I start asking some of the questions if in fact it's something that I need to pursue, especially on circumstances where maybe our office is getting calls or complaints and I need to figure out really quickly what is the correct question to ask, who is the correct person to ask it, and then trying to figure out a way to resolve it if in fact it is an issue. Because it's a double-edged sword. I can have a company too that has significant complaints, and I go, oh, it shows up as an outlier. That's what market analysis does. I need to do something about it, right? But what if the company is a long-term care company and they just came out with a 40 or 50% rate increase and our state approved it? Okay, so am I going to go after an insurance company that, okay, yeah, they got some complaints, but it was on, people they're disgruntled because of the rate increase.
Mm-hmm.
So do I go and say, okay, life insurance company, long-term care company, what have you, I need to go and contact you about why are you having all these complaints? Well, it kind of comes out when I look at the complaints received by our office, what the root cause is. And so I'm probably not going to go that way. So it's one thing to look at the data, but it's just a number. So what does the number mean? That's where I have to do the research to try to figure that out and then see, okay, what next steps are. And then the other side of that is, okay, maybe the company just filed a huge rate increase for auto or what have you, or they came out with a new product or a new campaign. I'll monitor that and then see if the complaints do recede. Because, yeah, you may have a spike because it's an implementation of a new product. I might actually be causing more harm because I'm tying up resources for the insurance company because they're actually trying to get the product launched correctly and get everything fixed, than trying to spend the time to do the research to come up with, a document that explains what everything is. So I might pick up the phone, call them, and go, okay, well, I'm going to follow up in like 60 days and just see how things go. More of a conversation and just, to touch base. So.
Yeah. Well, when I first asked that question, Larry, I couldn't help but notice there was a pretty good chuckle from you. So tell me what's on your mind about the websites and touting products that haven't been filed for yet. You haven't had a client do that before, have you?
Oh, no clients ever do anything wrong. Look, I mean, this is refreshing to hear because the budgets in insurance departments across the United States have obviously been either frozen or limited. The people in New York that I used to know are all gone for the most part. There's been a lot of turnover in the regulatory side of the industry. Commissioners have come and gone and have different levels of knowledge. And this is refreshing to hear somebody actually knows what they're talking about, understands what's going out there, and actually goes beyond what most people understand and knows how to, scrape the data and do fancy stuff. I would suspect that that's not the norm out there throughout the departments in this country, from my experience. It's something that there's no real difference between the brain drain in the industry itself and the recruitment problems and getting young people into the industry, and the same thing on the regulatory side. Clearly, all this is moving online, has moved online. Every day there's a new company that's purely, on an app. Mm-hmm. They're not doing anything else. I mean, we have them in New York, Lemonade, for example, and there's many, many others. So clearly, the departments need to have, just as the companies need to have, these insurtech entrepreneurs or people with that level of ability to come into the regulatory regime so that they could do two things. One, make sure that somebody's not playing games and hurting consumers, but more importantly, so they understand what's going on, so these products can be fast-tracked and moved out. Because, you know, when you're doing it on this, you don't have 90 days, 120 days, 170 days to wait for your product. You know, somebody wants to click and have their insurance product on a micro insurance app in 30 seconds. You know, if they're you know, if they're in the gig economy, they have these apps they click on, they get insurance for the little gig that they're doing in 2 seconds. Well, someone had to approve that, which means you have to have somebody in the department that understands this stuff, understands what a smartphone is, you know, understands how these applications work, and understands the necessity for bringing these products to market and not waiting 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, 2 years to get a product to market. That's the biggest complaint you hear from clients who are trying to innovate is, I can't get it through the department. It's on somebody's desk. How the hell do I get it off the desk? You know, can you help me? You know, they'll call up somebody who's a former commissioner. Can you make a call? Could you find out what the problem is? Having people that understand this stuff, understand the technology, as we move more and more and more online, understand that you're going to have electronic signatures, not wet signatures, you know, understand all those kinds of things, to me is very refreshing. I've not seen, not that I work with regulators all day, because I don't, but I have not seen very many regulators who could talk about this subject like John has talked about the subject. So I'm actually excited and happy to hear it. Triennial, by the way, is a 3-year financial exam. Just it's a New York thing. Sorry.
I'm just impressed that there's somebody that's using their beautiful soup powers for good.
Yeah.
So, Rich, you knew what beautiful soup was? I figured you did.
I might have heard of it.
Might have, huh?
We might have touched it. No, John, thank you very much for your insights. And Larry, spot on. That was, yeah, it's so refreshing to hear someone know this stuff so well. Spot on, brand ambassador.
There we go. Well, we're like I say, I'm trying to move the ball forward. You know, I mean, I understand the technology aspect. When I went to college originally, I came in with the punch cards and write Fortran and COBOL routines. And if I had something out of sort, okay, 3 hours later, I'd find out that I had an error in my program and so forth.
So right now, I would love to share with you guys like what we do with our new technology, because one of the things that I find every time we do these sessions is a lot of people don't even know that we have a podcast, which is called Spot On Insurance, which Larry Schiffer has been a guest on episode 116. And he did one on Reinsurance 101. So if you want to learn about reinsurance, check out episode 116. He also did a COVID-19 bonus episode for us. And Joanne Delgado, our regulator from California, has also done an episode on surplus lines, on compliance do's and don'ts. So I just want to show you guys where you can find the podcast, how to get it, how you can subscribe to it. There's a little mark, subscribe. And also, I'll let Lysandra share what we're going to be doing today with our podcast.
So today, for our first 10 podcast subscribers, you get a free swag bag. We just need you to send a screenshot of your subscription to socialspot@soiteam.com. socialspot@soiteam.com.
Yes. And Larry, I know you have your swag bag. Yeah, so we're doing that now for our attendees of our compliance sessions, because it's crazy that so many people don't know that we have a podcast. And then a lot of times when we're interviewing guests, which the podcast is listened to in over 110 countries, when we're interviewing guests, they don't know that we have a regulatory compliance company. So.
I've got a few of those swag bags. I've done a few podcasts. It wasn't about market conduct. It's about something I know something about.
something else in compliance that you really, really love?
Lots of things she knows lots of stuff about.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Hey, we've got 10 minutes. So that means we're going to do the speed round. So all of the panelists, hands on your buzzer. And the one who has the most points at the end of this round will win a gift from me. I'll mail it to you. It's going to be hand sanitizer from Bath and Body Works, scented. I'll send you a set of 6. Good stuff.
No methanol in there, I hope.
I don't know. Let me try that again. That's good stuff. Bath and Body Works owes me money for that little promo, by the way.
Yeah, good luck with that.
All
Got to
right.
do it on Twitter and be a promoter. That's
True.
got to do it the right way.
Or Snap or Insta or something. I
Yeah,
don't know how to.
Instagram. Yeah.
I don't know how to operate really any of that.
That's the way to go.
So we had one chat question come in through, and I'm giggling at it. And so anybody who wants this, take it. But she says, when I worked in healthcare, we were always told to be honest with auditors, but not to volunteer information. Is this true for market conduct examinations and audits in insurance too?
I mean, I'm happy to respond to that. I'm not going to. I mean, the regulators and company people are going to have their view, but you know, when we deal with clients, and it's just not this context; it's any context like this. When you're dealing with a regulator, you got to tell them the truth. Just like if you're dealing with a prosecutor, you got to tell them the truth. You know, people take their clients by the hand and they go to the SEC and they self-report, because if they don't self-report, they go to jail. So you're not going to go to jail in this context, one hopes. But you know, you have to be honest. Now, honesty and bringing out information and answering the questions is one thing. Volunteering stuff you're not being asked about is something else. So you're not hiding anything. You're answering the questions or the subject that's being put forth. So yeah, you know, it's like everything else in life. I mean, answer the question that's in front of you, not the question that's not been asked. You know, if somebody wants to know your name, tell them your name. They're not interested in your address. If they are, they'll ask the question. That's deposition 101, by the way.
There you go.
That's very good. Very good.
Love that. Cindy, I have not been able to get to you yet, ma'am, but you are not off the hook. I have something for you. And I was going to ask, you know, some COVID-related questions, and we may not get to that today. It may be next week, but I know that you are going through some audits right now related to, you said it's related to COVID, and I think it's California, New Jersey. We talked about that a little bit. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, we're getting, have a fronting carrier, but we have our own captive. And we are getting requests from California, New Jersey right now, because those states are allowing refunds on certain lines of business. So we have to tell them, you know, what the premium was collected, what premium was returned, you know, like what we did. We have a process where we decide, you know, have they been harmed by COVID, or has their business declined? You know, they have to give us some sort of proof before we'll entertain the refunds. But I think it depends on the line of business, but I think there's some other states that are doing that too. Ours is a liability product, so we are reporting for, Larry's shaking his head. We have California, New Jersey for our product. I'm sure there's many other states that are asking for the same information.
There's a lot of data calls. I mean, there have been a lot of data calls on COVID-19, particularly in the business interruption area, obviously, where all the action is and all the lawsuits are. So it's you know, it's New Jersey, California, New York did one earlier. There's probably a half a dozen or a dozen more states, and I thought the NAIC did one too.
Yeah, they did.
So this may be completely unrelated. Like I have State Farm for my car insurance, and they gave me back like $150 in premium last month, but that's not a that's not a refund in the sense that you're talking about a refund, right? That's not something the State Farm do. That's just something they did out of the goodness of their own heart, right? Come on, Larry, tell me.
Cindy, you could answer that. I have a comment on that.
That's what the computer says.
I think it's good
It's kind
marketing.
of, I guess the answer is it depends. Just because somebody thinks they're owed a refund doesn't mean they'll get a refund. I mean, they have to prove financial impact. I can't answer for the auto carriers because we're a liability provider, but I believe some of the auto carriers just did do a flat across the board of some percent. I don't know how they calculated it, but ours, we have a formulation to see where there was an impact to the business before we just, we didn't say, okay, everybody gets $500 back. They have to show that there's been financial impact.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because see, I didn't file anything. It just
that's not the case with the auto insurers. The auto insurers were highly encouraged to do something because people were not driving. Highly encouraged.
Highly encouraged.
Yes. So State Farm did that. I have Geico, and I'm supposed to get 15% off, I guess, the next renewal. I think every carrier did it a little bit differently, but it was highly encouraged.
Yeah. And when I saw the commercials, I said to Ted, look at them. They're saying that they're giving this money back, but it is being pushed by legislators to refund the consumers because the cars aren't being used.
Well, they went like this. They said, it might be a good idea if you give some money back because nobody's driving and you have no accident cases to deal with and you're not paying any claims. What do you think? Do you think you should give some money back?
Yeah.
It was a recommendation.
But when I saw the commercials, I was like, great marketing that they're saying that
they made virtue out of extortion there.
They didn't lie. I don't really care where it came from. I got $150 back. I'm happy about that. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me find my other COVID questions.
Yes.
The answer's yes. This
you got
has
a 50-50 shot.
This is well, of course, how has COVID affected regulatory audits more or less? And you just kind of mentioned that, Cindy, that you are going through those audits as a result of COVID. Who else has some information on that? More audits? Much more audits?
This is John. I'm not sure that there's more audits, at least for Washington State. We're running, doing the same thing that we've always been doing. At the NAIC, though, we did give some relief on like the market conduct annual statement filings and gave basically everyone a 60-day extension just across the board because we knew getting the information from third-party vendors that might be under a lockdown or what have you might be, a bit of an issue. We're finding that most of the companies actually are getting staff or getting set up so they can do stuff more online. And so originally it wasn't, we were giving people another like 2-week extension or something to get the information, but it seems like people are starting to feel the routine now. They're found out, hey, I don't necessarily have to do everything at home or at the office or whatever. As long as they've got a computer, they've got access. So if you were saying, okay, in April or March, I'm going, okay, yeah, I'd have some real comments on that. But now a lot of it seems to be kind of baked that this is kind of the new normal, and people are starting to accept that.
Awesome. Hey, back to our discussion about the rebate or whatever you want to call it from the auto insurers. It looks to me like Lisa's just a little bit salty because she only got $13 back. I'm sorry, Lisa.
Safe drivers save 40%.
Oh my goodness.
Nobody knows Dennis Hassert's name. It's terrible.
I don't. We've only got 2 minutes left, so I don't know if we have time to really jump into another one. John, you did kind of get into my very next question, and that was about any extension of time for the financial statements. You said 60 days.
That was on the market conduct annual statement,
On the
only
annual
because I chair the market analysis procedures working group, and so that's kind of in my wheelhouse. And I'm also on one of the committees that decides how those blanks get constructed. So that's my part to share on this. But as a regulator, I can't accept any gratuities from you folks. So unfortunately, even if I do get the points, I can't accept it.
No swag bag for him.
Nope. I can't even send you it's hand sanitizer.
You can't take these guys to lunch. They have to pay for it. No joke. They have to pay for it themselves.
Yeah.
No,
That's been for a long time.
yeah. We've experienced that at ILSA because there's a lot of times when we want to say thank you for the work that they were doing with us, and we wanted to send them some swag, and just like they couldn't accept anything.
No.
So we're familiar. Yeah.
Well, they divided it up amongst all the folks in the office.
Yeah. No, but we certainly appreciate all of our guest panelists today. John, Cindy, Joanne, Larry, thank you so much. Next week, we are going to cover part 2 of this, right, Joyce?
Oh, yes. Thank you. You left plenty of questions for next week.
Yeah. And
thank you.
And we're going to get into some of the stories and, real life situations. So can't wait. We're looking forward to it. If you guys think of any questions during the week, you can send your questions to ccquestions@ilsainc.com. And also, if you need to get in contact with any of our guest panelists that were here today, make sure that you drop us a line and we will put you in contact with them right away.
And if you're interested in any of the replays on what we've done so far, because there have been many others, you can look it up on our YouTube channel. You go to YouTube and the channel is Spot On Insurance.
Good name.
Spot on.
It's spot on.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.